forced through the back door the usurpation of powers by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu from the Senate shameless bid to silence Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan for demanding that the President of the Nigerian Senate should uphold the moral standard required of that office, to the uncouth outbursts of an undistinguished senatorial misfit who tried in vain to silence the distinguished citizens attempting to testify on behalf of Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan. It is clear that our so-called leaders are determined to turn Nigeria into a mafia state. At the center of this political banditry is the motor park brand of politics, nurtured by the old brigade politicians, and in recent times by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Mr. President, it is through your influence that the Nigerian National Assembly has become a haven for legislative rascality. Mr. President, it's under your watch that the National Assembly has become an extension of the executive, grossly violating the principles of separation of powers and rubber stamping the whims and caprices of your office, all while singing the international anthem of sycophants. On your mandate we shall stand. Mr. President, thanks to your political machinations, Nigeria is now bedeviled by a captured National Assembly, the most ineffective in its checks and balances role since the start of the Fourth Republic. In 2006, the Fourth National Assembly had the audacity to reject the tenure extension bid of a sitting president. In 2010, the Sixth National Assembly summoned the courage to stand against a power hijacking cabal and restore Nigeria to the path of constitutionality by invoking the doctrine of necessity. In 2011, the House of Representatives of the Seventh National Assembly had the courage to elect its leaders, as did the Senate of the Eighth National Assembly in 2015, defying executive interference. This National Assembly, the 10th, has by its unconstitutional endorsement of the President's abuse of powers proven to be the most spineless in our recent history. Through its actions and inactions, the National Assembly has in effect become the 48th member of the President's cabinet. While a cabinet minister by the name of Wike, is it Wike or Wike or Wakeep? Why a cabinet minister has more or less become a third-time state governor in Rivers State, pampered by the indulgences of the president. Recent events have made it clear to Nigerians that had this assembly been in place in 2006, when the third-term agenda was proposed, our democracy would have since morphed into one of Africa's lamentable tales of sit-tight dictatorship. To the president of the Nigerian Senate, who has not heeded the call to subject himself to an unbiased investigation, to clear his name of the allegations leveled against him, and under whose leadership the National Assembly has become a carry-go legislature, hiding under the umbrella of technicalities and a dubious voice voting system, I leave you and your conscience with the words of Frederic Bessières, former deputy of the French National Assembly. He said, and I quote, "When plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men in a society, over the course of time, they create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it." To the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, under whose brand of politics the institution of legislative oversight is collapsing and our democracy is faced with an existential threat, I say, Mr. President, Nigeria is too delicate for this.
This is a quick reminder to anybody that cares to know. I want you to know that Yahaya Bello is still moving freely, despite enough evidence of embezzlement and corrupt practices is still moving freely without a sentence. I equally want to bring to your notice that the former MD of the NDDC has alleged Akpabio to be involved in a lot of corruptions and shady deals, and he's the Senate President of Nigeria today. I equally want to remind you of the fact that the person that came out at a point in time to say he doesn't believe in one Nigeria is now the president of one Nigeria. I equally want to remind you that the list of the sponsors of terrorism was made available to the past administration, and they are sitting on it, and the present administration is not doing anything about that. I equally want to remind you as well that the former Minister of Humanitarian Affairs was alleged to be involved in corruption and shady deals, which resulted to her sacking. So I want to tell you that she was only sacked but not indicted. I also want to remind you that the Boko Haram members have been pardoned by the federal government. But Nnamdi Kanu has been facing terrorism charge for years now, and he's yet to be sentenced, and he's yet to be pardoned as well. I want to remind you as well that farmers in remote villages are still paying tax for them to be able to go to farm. Farmers in the villages are still paying levies to bandits for them to be able to go to farm. I want to remind you as well that according to Amechi, that the problem between Fubara and Wike that gave birth to the state of emergency was nothing but a disagreement over sharing formula of state resources. I want to remind you as well that the people trying to form a new coalition, a new alliance, are nobody but former members of PDP and the APC. I want to remind you as well that El Rufai was one of the major advocates of the Muslim ticket that gave birth to Tinibu. The same El Rufai now is the major advocate of a coalition that will get rid of Tinibu. I want to remind you as well that some of the cleric scholars, the imams, are still preaching the message of fanaticism and hatred. And I also want to remind you that some of the pastors are still preaching the message of fraud, scam, and delusive prosperity. I also want to remind you that the bill to ban open grazing that is associated with a lot of atrocities and a lot of illegalities is still experiencing a setback in the Senate House. I also want to remind you that it's only the Senate President of Nigeria that can send prayers into people's accounts in order for them to enjoy their weekends. I want to remind you as well that some of the general overseers have built schools and universities out of common people money, out of their tithe and their offering that their children cannot attend. I want to remind you too as well that a good number of Northerners believes that the Sharia is superior to the Constitution. I want to equally remind you that a lot of celebrities that the common man, we, have made millionaires and billionaires are yet to lend their voice in regards to the atrocities and the bad happenings that is happening in the country at the moment. I want to bring to your notice as well that the soldiers and the security agencies are still complaining of being shortchanged by the system. And nothing is yet to be done about that. I equally want to remind you that slots are still being given to politicians and political office holders in regards to recruitment and a lot of other things. I equally want to remind you as well that you have a voice in the midst of all this, only if you believe. I want to remind you as well in the words of Mahatma Gandhi that said, gently you can shake the wall. But I equally want to remind you that we Nigerians are very good at forgetting things and pursuing mirage. And I also want to bring to your notice as well that a lot will not share this, will not make this go round, and will still keep pursuing the mirage.
Yesterday was fire because yesterday Pastor Tunde Bakara exposed more about what is actually going on right now in the Senate.